They stole my bonus. Not by accident, not because of a mistake. It was deliberate. I'd worked months, delivered results, kept the system running, yet the numbers on my paycheck were lower than promised. I felt the heat in my chest as I realized what had happened. Most people would react. They'd email HR, they'd demand a meeting, they'd vent to colleagues. But I didn't, because reacting in the moment is what people expect. And the expectation is leverage. The office felt quieter than usual. Leadership wandered through updates, oblivious to the undercurrents. No one noticed or cared that the operations I'd been quietly running were tied to a license agreement that governed the company's analytics platform, a system everyone relied on, yet no one understood. That license lived in the shadows, a small clause tucked into contracts and dependencies, something only I had consistently managed. Everyone assumed it would function automatically. They assumed continuity was guaranteed. They were wrong. Anger bubbled under the surface, but I let it settle. Immediate confrontation would have only confirmed the narrative the boss wanted. That I'd overreacted, that I was emotional, that my value was only visible when loud. I reviewed the analytics flow in my mind. Timelines, approvals, conditional releases. Every operational checkpoint depended on someone knowing their responsibility. And in this case, almost all of it routed through me. It wasn't power in the obvious sense. It wasn't authority on paper. It was control hidden in dependency. I didn't storm into a meeting. I didn't demand explanations. I didn't email threats. I waited. Because patience is a weapon people rarely recognize. I knew the system had natural momentum. If that momentum paused, people would start to notice the invisible threads that held it together. The moment they realized they weren't in control, the illusion of authority would crumble quietly. I had been underestimated, and underestimation is where leverage lives. The following morning, I made one call, not accusatory, not defensive. I framed it as a routine check, something easy for anyone to accept when stakes are high. Does this assumption still hold given recent internal changes? I asked, my voice calm, neutral, helpful. I didn't mention the bonus. I didn't reference the stolen recognition. I didn't connect the dots. I didn't need to. My question rippled through operations, forcing teams to verify dependencies they had assumed were secure. Approvals stalled. Confirmations paused. The analytics engine slowed. Quietly, methodically, without anyone needing to raise alarms. By midday, leadership began to notice. The reports they relied on didn't refresh as expected. Emails went unanswered. Meetings were scheduled to address discrepancies they hadn't anticipated. Their confidence, previously so loud, shifted into caution. The same people who had smiled and dismissed my work were suddenly asking for context. What changed? How is this affected? They spoke in careful, precise terms, testing assumptions. They hadn't realized the system's continuity relied on the person they had dismissed, underestimated, and in their eyes, replaced. It was subtle, almost invisible to anyone not paying attention. No one yelled. No one faced humiliation. The system didn't fail spectacularly. It paused, held together by the exact dependencies they had ignored. And in that pause, the hidden power became visible. It wasn't about retaliation. It wasn't about forcing recognition. It was about letting reality reflect their assumptions back at them. Momentum without understanding is fragile. Awareness is leverage. People began recalibrating without knowing they were. Conversations became more careful. Requests for information arrived sooner, not retroactively. The license clause I controlled had forced checks that were previously overlooked. Internal confidence had to realign with actual dependencies. Those who had assumed visibility, equaled control discovered that influence often hides in silence. My patience had revealed it without confrontation. Without anger, without spectacle, I didn't celebrate. I didn't ask for apologies. That would have been satisfying in a petty way, but it wasn't necessary. The balance had shifted on its own. Respect returned not because I demanded it, but because the system now reflected the cost of ignoring it. My role was clarified. My input was requested proactively. Operations flowed more smoothly once attention was realigned. Quietly, without theatrics, the stolen bonus became a lesson far larger than any paycheck could represent. The lesson here isn't about analytics or contracts or even stolen bonuses. It's about understanding leverage and patience. Most people equate influence with visibility, volume, and confrontation. They believe the loudest voice holds authority. But real control often exists in the quiet, the unseen, the dependencies that sustain the system. When those dependencies are mismanaged, assumptions are exposed. The moment you act deliberately, strategically without emotional reaction, the system itself reflects the truth. Public affronts, stolen credit, and petty leadership moves are tests. People assume you will absorb them, react loudly, or validate their version of reality. The alternative isn't confrontation. It's awareness, seeing clearly where value flows, understanding dependencies, and choosing when to act. I didn't need to demand recognition for the bonus. I only needed to pause the momentum they assumed was permanent. In doing so, the cost of oversight became apparent, not through spectacle, but through clarity. The strongest position isn't one that announces itself. It doesn't require drama, emails, meetings, or complaints. It's the position where your influence is understood through outcomes, rather than declarations. The bonus, the license, the analytics platform, none of it required aggression to assert control. It was patience, attention to detail, and an understanding of the system that made the difference. Others' assumptions had already created the leverage. I only had to let it work naturally. By the end of the week, behavior had shifted. Leadership approached me with precision rather than presumption. Internal alignment improved. Requests came sooner. Language changed from directives to collaboration. The stolen bonus never became public discussion because it no longer mattered in the same way. Power had not been seized. It had been revealed. And once revealed, it required no further assertion. Recognition arrived silently, through the acknowledgement of reality itself. This isn't about revenge. It's about insight, about recognizing that influence isn't always in your title, your paycheck, or your seat at the table. It's often in the threads that make the system function. When you stop reacting emotionally, you gain time. When you pause strategically, the world recalibrates around the truth. The license clause didn't shut down analytics out of spite. It revealed who had the real control. That's where leverage truly lives. In patience, precision, and clarity. And the ultimate lesson? The strongest position isn't the one that demands respect. It's the one that no longer has to.